The crate weighs 11 kilos and I packed it myself, so I know every gram of it. 4 kilos of pine, 3 of straw, 2 of the pane, and the rest is the linseed putty I couldn't get off my hands before they told me to board. They gave me a seat with the delegation. Nadia Sarat sits across the aisle in a suit the color of wet slate and does not look at the crate, because she has been looking at it for 9 days and has run out of ways to do it without showing her face. Behind her there are 4 analysts and a protocol officer and a man from the linguistics section whose name I never catch. And behind them, strapped to the deck with cargo webbing, is my grandmother's kitchen window. I am a glazier. I cut glass and I set glass and I reputty sashes for people who have been told by 3 other men that the whole frame wants replacing. I have been doing it since I was 19. I am 61. Nobody in the history of the species has been less qualified to sit in this chair, and everybody on this shuttle knows it, and Sarat is the only one honest enough to have said so to my face. "You'll do the talking about the glass," she told me in a corridor 4 days ago. "Only the glass. If they ask you anything else, look at me. And if you're not looking back, then say you're a glazier," she said, "and let it sit there." The married vessel does not have a name. That is the first thing you learn about them, and it is meant to teach you something, and it does. Names are alterations. A thing that is named has been touched by the namer. Our people call the vessel the long regard, which is a translation of a phrase that isn't a name either, and the married tolerate our doing it the way you tolerate a dog rearranging your shoes. Through the shuttle port it is not a ship so much as a lens with a life support system grown around it like coral. 2 kilometers of it, matte and pale, and at one end a great open eye of a thing, a hollow ring, and inside the ring nothing you can see. It is pointed away from us. It has been pointed away from us since long before there was an us. It is aimed at a valley on a world 400 light-years off, called by them the thing that we translate, badly, as Sesame, and it has been aimed there for 900,000 years without a break of more than 11 seconds, and those 11 seconds are recorded and apologized for in a document that the linguistics man says runs to 200 pages. That is what they do. That is the whole of what they do. They look at one place and they do not change it. Here is the problem, as Sarat explains it to me, while the shuttle burns its long, slow curve toward the docking spine, because she has decided that a man ought to know why he is being carried somewhere. The concordance seats species by regard, not by fleets, not by worlds held, not by output, not by the count of the dead you can put in the field, and I want you to understand that this came as a relief to us at first and then, gradually, as something worse than a war would have been. Regard means, show us a thing you have watched. Show us the length of your attention. Show us that you are capable of looking at something for long enough that the looking becomes an inheritance. The Osenwold brought a tide line, 60,000 years of it, marked on a cliff. The Neth brought a star, 400,000 years of temperature logs, and their delegate wept, or did whatever it is they do, when the regard called it sufficient. The married themselves do not compete. They preside. 900,000 years of a valley is not a submission. It is the standard against which submissions are measured, and the married are so old and so still that when they sit in concordance the other species arrange their chairs so as not to be in front of them. And we came in with nothing. Oh, we had things. That was the humiliation of it. We had so much. We had cave paintings and star catalogs. We had a temple in Malta and a tally stick from the Congo. We had 4,000 years of Chinese eclipse records, and we had the Nile flood levels cut into rock, and every single one of them failed the same test, and the test was not age. The test was unbroken. We stopped looking. That is what the analysts found after 11 weeks when they had run every archive humanity has and come up empty. We stop looking and we come back, and we look again with different eyes, and we say a different thing about what we saw. We burned the temple's records. We repurposed the tally stick. We lost the eclipse tables twice and reconstructed them from a copy of a copy. And when we found the original, we found it disagreed, and we published a paper about that and called it Progress. The married read all of it. They were courteous. Their courtesy was the worst part. The regard must not alter what is regarded, they said. It is their whole liturgy and their whole science, and it took me a while to understand it isn't a rule about being gentle. It's a rule about being absent. To look at a thing for 900,000 years, you must never once want anything from it. You must never lean on it. You must never take from it, or add to it, or need it to be a particular way tomorrow, because want is a pressure and pressure is alteration, and the married have made themselves into an eye with no hand behind it. They found us unable to demonstrate a single unaltered regard. They did not say, therefore you are unworthy. Sarah says that is not how they talk. They said, therefore you may present again when you are able, and there is no clock on that. There is no appeal on that. There are species who have been presenting again for 200,000 years. So what did we present? I asked her. And she looked out the port at that great blind ring and she said, your window. I want to be fair to the analysts, because I've been unfair to them in my head for 3 weeks and it's poor sport. They didn't pick my window because it was old. It isn't old. 213 years is nothing. There is glass in England twice that and glass in Syria older than the alphabet, and they had all of it available and they went through all of it. They picked mine because of an entry in a parish record, and then a second entry in a school exercise book, and then a photograph from 1911, and then a rent ledger, and then my grandmother's diary, and then my mother's, and then a home video from 1994 in which a child who is now me is being lifted up to a window and told, in a voice I have not heard in 30 years, to find the crooked post. 6 generations, unbroken, the same 3 seconds of looking, done by every child in that house at roughly the age of 4, at the same object through the same flaw. The flaw is a bubble. It sits in the lower left quadrant of the pane, about a third of the way up. It is 4 millimeters across at its widest, and it is not round. It is drawn out slightly along one axis. The way a bubble is when the glass it's trapped in was spun flat while still soft. It has a small tail. Under a loop it looks like a comma. It is the ordinary, cheap, unremarkable failure of a man in 1813 who was blowing cylinder glass at the edge of a village and did not care particularly whether the batch had seeds in it, because it was going into a farmhouse and not a cathedral. And what a bubble does when you look through it is bend the world. Not much. It's 4 millimeters. But everything behind it goes wrong in a small specific way, and if you stand where the sink is, and the sink has been in the same place since the house was rebuilt in 1868, and if you look through the bubble at the fence at the bottom of the yard, the 4th post from the gate does not stand up straight. It leans. It leans left and the top of it curls slightly, like something ashamed. There is nothing wrong with the post. The post is fine. 6 posts have stood in that hole and every one of them has been true and plumb, and every one of them, seen through that bubble from that sink, has bent. We call it the crooked post. My mother called it that. Her father called it that. There is a sentence in Elsie Halloran's diary, dated the 17th of March 1922, that reads, "Showed Tom the crooked post today, he cried, so did I, for other reasons." That is what the analysts found, and they took it to the married. The docking is silent. Everything about the married is silent, not out of reverence but because sound is a pressure too, and I am beginning to understand that they have thought about this more than we have thought about anything. We are taken along a corridor that is white and dry and smells like the inside of a clean bottle. There is no signage. There are no lamps. The light comes from the walls or from something behind the walls, and it is the flat, honest white of an overcast noon. I have worked in 100 houses under 100 lights, and I know good light when I stand in it. And this is good light, the kind you'd want to cut glass by, the kind that shows you every ream and every wave. Sarah walks ahead. I carry my own crate because when the protocol officer reached for it, I said no, and he looked at Sarat and she said, "Let him." Behind us, two married. I will try to describe them. They are tall and they are thin and they are the color of a wasp's nest, that gray-brown paper color, and their bodies are not really bodies so much as an arrangement for holding an eye above the ground. The eye is at the top. It is not like ours. It is a broad dark band and it goes most of the way round the head, and it does not blink and it does not move in the socket because there is no socket. When a married wants to look at something, it turns the whole of itself. Slowly. It is a great courtesy among them to turn. They have 4 limbs and they use 2 of them, and the other 2 are folded and have been folded, I think, for a very long time. Neither of them turns toward me. They walk beside us and their eyes take in the corridor and everything in it, including me, including my crate, because everything is always in their regard, and none of it is looked at, and that is the difference, and it took me the whole corridor to feel it. I have never in my life been so completely seen, and so completely not noticed. The sitting hall is a white room the size of a church, and it is full of daylight. I stop in the doorway, I can't help it. Sarah stops too, and I don't think she meant to. The light comes from one wall. That wall is the back of the lens, and it is not a window. It is a plate of something that is not glass and is not water and is doing the work of both. And the light coming through it is 400 years old, and it has crossed the space between here and Sesame, and it is falling now on a white floor in the shape of a long, soft rectangle. And inside that rectangle, faint as breath on cold metal, is the valley. It is a projection, and it is not a projection. It is what the lens sees, laid down on the floor at scale, at whatever scale the room permits, and it is moving. There is wind in it. There is a river the width of my thumb. There is a slope of something that is not grass and behaves like grass, going pale and dark and pale as the air moves over it, and there is a stand of tall things by the water that are not trees and cast shadows exactly the way trees do. The Valley of Sesame, at noon, 400 years ago, and 900,000 years continuous, and the light of it is warm on my face. Nobody speaks. The married have arranged themselves around the rectangle in a wide ring, perhaps 40 of them, and every one of them is turned to it, and the great dark bands of their eyes are full of the little moving valley, and I understand with an awful lurch that this is not a courtroom. It is a hearth. They are sitting around the thing they love. They have been sitting around it since before my species had a spine. And we have come to argue that we are their equals, because a child in Northumberland was once lifted up to a sink. The long regard is at the far end of the room, and the long regard is one of them, and is not one of them. It is old, I can't tell you how I know. The paper color of it has gone almost white, and the folded limbs have fused where they fold, and it does not stand. It is held in a cradle of the same white stuff as the walls, and it faces the lens, and it has faced the lens for what the linguistics man says is 11,000 years of personal service, which is a fraction of the total, which is the point, which is the entire point of them. No one of them has to live long, because none of them ever looks away, so the looking is never interrupted. They pass the valley to each other like a held breath. When we enter, the long regard does not turn. A younger one turns, the one they have given us to speak with, called Isam, which is not a name but a station, and means something like the one who is nearest the door. Isam turns his whole body to us slowly, with great effort, and it is the first courtesy anyone has done us in 9 days. "You have brought the object," Isam says. The voice comes from a translator panel in the floor, flat, without cadence. "We have," says Sarat, "presented. Here is what I do, because it is the only thing in this room I know how to do. I set the crate on the floor. I take out my pocket knife and I cut the strapping. I lift the lid and set the lid to one side, face down, so it doesn't rock. I take out the straw in handfuls and I put the handfuls in the lid, and I do not scatter one stalk of it on their white floor. Then I take out the pane. It is 31 centimeters by 42. It weighs a little under 2 kilos. It is the color of very weak tea, and it is not flat. It has the roll and swim of cylinder glass, the long shallow reams running vertical because that's how it was cut. And along the bottom edge, there is a stain the shape of a fingernail, where 150 years of condensation ran down and pooled in the putty. I have carried it 400 light years, and I have not carried it in a padded case. I carried it in straw. Straw is what you carry glass in. I will not be told otherwise by anyone in this room. There is a frame waiting because Sarat's people negotiated a frame. It is a simple white stand, 2 uprights and a groove, and it is set in the light of the lens at the edge of the moving valley. I set the pane in the groove, and I steady it with 2 fingers until it stops rocking. Then I take my hands away. The light of sesame comes through my grandmother's window. There is a sound in the room. It is very small. It's the sound 40 tall things make when every one of them draws its folded limbs in 1 centimeter. Because the pane is filthy with itself. That's what nobody warned them. 213 years of hand-blown glass in the path of a clean light, and the reams throw long soft bars across the floor, and the bottom edge scatters a smear of it, and the whole rectangle of Sesame's Valley develops, at once, a slow warp in the lower left where the light has come through a 4-millimetre bubble. The river bends. For the first time in 900,000 years, the river in that valley bends where it does not bend, and the stand of tall things by the water leans left, and the top of the tallest one curls slightly, like something ashamed. Isam makes a noise. The translator does not translate. And down at the far end in the white cradle, the long regard turns. Not much, perhaps 4 degrees. Slow, so slow, the way tide turns, the way an old man turns in a chair when he has decided that the thing behind him is worth the pain of the turning. The great dark band of the eye comes round off the lens, off the valley it has held for 11,000 years of its own life, and it settles on a piece of cheap farmhouse glass on a stand. Sarat has stopped breathing. I hear her not doing it. Remove it, Isam says. No, I say. I did not plan to say it. Sarat had one instruction for me, and I have broken it inside 90 seconds, and I would like to tell you that I stood there with the dignity of my species on my shoulders. But the truth is I am a man who has spent 40 years being told to take his glass out of somebody's house, and something in me answered before the rest of me was consulted. Sarat's head comes round. I look at her. She is not looking back. So I say it, I'm a glazier. And I let it sit there. Isam does not move for a long time. When he speaks, the flat voice comes up out of the floor, and it has more words in it than it did before, which I have learned is what distress looks like in a species that cannot raise its voice. The regard must not alter what is regarded, he says. Your object has entered the path. The valley is altered. 900,000 years. 11 seconds of interruption total, all of it accidental, all of it recorded, all of it grieved. And you have bent the river. I've bent the light, I say. There is no difference. There's all the difference, I say, and I hear how it sounds and I cannot stop it, and you'd know that if you'd ever touched it. I am going to be careful here because what happened next has been described in 4 separate reports by people who were in that room, and none of them agree with me, and one of them says I shouted. I did not shout. I have never shouted at a customer in my life, and I did not start with these. What I did was walk over to the pane and put my thumb on it. 40 Merid came up off the floor. I don't mean they stood. I mean the folded limbs, the ones that have been folded for a very long time, came half open, all at once, with a sound like 40 pages turning, and Isam's whole body was between me and the lens before I had finished the motion, and the translator panel in the floor said, 3 times, do not, do not, do not. I stopped with my thumb a centimeter from the glass. You see it, I said. You see it now. You've been looking at that valley for 900,000 years, and I raised my hand at a window and you moved. Nobody said anything. You didn't move for the valley, I said. You moved for the glass. Sarah got me out of the light. I let her. She put a hand flat on my chest and walked me back 3 steps and stood in front of me, and she began to talk to Issam in the careful language they had built over 11 weeks, about apology, and about the accidental, and about the willingness of humanity to withdraw the object and present again in whatever span of years the concordance found appropriate. And Issam stood in front of the lens with his limbs half open and did not answer her. Because the long regard was still turned. It had not turned back. Through all of it, my thumb, the shout that was not a shout, 40 of its kin coming up off the floor, the old one in the white cradle had held its dark band on my grandmother's window, and it was still holding it, and the valley of Sesame was running unwatched across the floor at its feet for the first time in 11,000 years of its life. Issam saw it. I watched him see it. I watched the great gray shape of him go absolutely still, and I understood that I was seeing something that had no precedent in a civilization that keeps its precedents in 200-page documents about 11 seconds. The long regard had looked away. Explain the flaw, the long regard said. The voice was not flat. The panel and the floor rendered it flat, because a translator can only be as good as its instructions. But there was a shape underneath it, a long, low shape, and the linguistics man told me later that in 900,000 years of transcript there are 2 recorded instances of the long regard using the interrogative case, and he was crying when he told me, and he did not seem to know it. Sarat turned. She looked at me for a long moment, the way you look at a tool you're not sure will hold, and then she stepped aside. So I went back into the light and I stood beside my grandmother's window, and I put my hands behind my back where everyone could see them, and I explained the flaw. It's a bubble, I said. Air. It got trapped when the glass was made, and the glass was made by a man swinging a bottle of it on the end of a pipe until it went out flat, and he wasn't careful because it was going into a farmhouse. You can see it there, lower left, about a third of the way up, 4 millimeters. It bends the light that comes through it. Everything behind it goes crooked. Not much, you can see how much it's on your floor. In my house there's a sink under that window. It's been in the same place since the house was rebuilt. And out the back there's a fence, and there's a post in that fence, 4th from the gate. If you stand at the sink and you look through the bubble, the post leans. It doesn't lean. It's plumb. I said it myself in 2019. I said it with a spirit level and a bag of postcrete, and I stood at the sink afterwards and I looked and it leaned. The room was very quiet. We call it the crooked post, I said. My mother called it that. Her father did. His mother wrote it in a diary in 1922 in a sentence about her son crying. And when a child in that house turns 4, someone picks them up. You have to be picked up. That's the thing, a child can't see it standing. Someone picks them up and holds them at the sink and says, "Find the crooked post." I stopped. 6 generations, I said. That's all, that's the whole of it, that's what we brought you. Issam's limbs folded slowly, one and then the other. It is not an observation, he said. It is an error. You have observed an error. Yes. 213 years is not sufficient. No. Then you concede. No, I said, ask me about the post. The long regard asked about the post. I want that in the record because it is the sentence that everything turned on and nobody in the reports has written it plainly. The oldest continuously conscious thing in the seated concordance, the eye of a species that has made not wanting into a religion, turned 4 degrees off a valley it had loved for 11,000 years, and asked a glazier about a fence post. There have been 6, I said. 6 posts in that hole, they rot. It's wet ground, you get 20, 30 years out of one if you creosote it. My great-grandfather put in the 3rd. My mother put in the 5th in 1988 and she did it wrong, and I want to tell you exactly how she did it wrong. She dug the hole 2 feet to the left. There was a drain gone in and the old hole was over the run of it, so she moved the post. Perfectly sensible. Good workmanship. She set it plumb and she filled it and she went inside and she washed her hands at the sink. I looked at the pane. The light of sesame came through it and put the valley's bent river on their floor. And she looked up, I said, and the post was straight. I have thought about my mother at that sink more than I have thought about almost anything. She was 41. She had 2 children and a bad back and a farm that was not making money, and she had just spent a Saturday doing a hard job correctly, and she looked up through her grandmother's glass, and the world was straight, and there was nothing wrong with it at all. She dug it up, I said. Isam's eye did not move because it cannot, but the whole gray length of him turned another few degrees toward me, and I thought, there it is. That's what turning is for. She dug the post up, I said, and she filled the second hole and she cut a channel round the drain and she put the post back in the old place out of true over the run of it where it would rot faster. She lost 11 years of that post's life. She knew she was doing it. She wrote about it, a little badly on the back of a feed invoice, which we still have, and what she wrote was, couldn't have the children looking at nothing. I put my hand out palm up toward the pane, not touching it, just there. 6 times we have put a post in the wrong place, I said, so that it would look right through the wrong glass. We have moved the world to fit the flaw. That's what I've brought you. It's not an observation. It never was. You want to know how long we've looked at a thing without altering it, and the answer is, never, not once, not for a single afternoon in the whole of our history. But you asked us to show you our regard, and this is our regard. It goes out. It gets into the yard. It puts its hands on the fence. The long regard said, the glass is worn. I stopped. I had not said that. Nobody had said that. I turned and I looked at the pane, and at the lower left, and under and around the bubble, where the light was going soft and scattered instead of clean, and the long regard from 30 meters away, in 400-year-old borrowed light, with an eye that has never once had to focus on anything nearer than a star, had seen it. Yes, I said. My voice was not right. I fixed it. Yes, that's your seeing where it's been cleaned. That corner's been rubbed with a cloth 2-3 times a week for 200 years, always the same corner because it's the corner the children breathe on. Glass wears. It's a liquid in the way that matters. There's about 1/100th of a millimeter gone out of that corner. We took it off the frame in April. The bubble's 4 millimeters. The wear around it is 110 millimeters across. I held my hands up, thumb to thumb. About that. That's the shape of our regard. That's the size of the patch where 6 generations of us have been leaning. I let my hands drop. You've watched that valley for 900,000 years, I said, and it doesn't know. The silence that followed lasted, according to the record, 1 minute and 51 seconds. For 1 minute and 51 seconds nobody in the sitting hall looked at Sesame. The valley ran on across the white floor. The wind moved in the pale grass that was not grass. The river went about its bend, and 40 Marids stood in a broken ring with their limbs half folded and their great dark bands turned inward, at the light coming through a farmhouse window, at the warp in the lower left, at the crooked stand of tall things by the water, and the long regard in its cradle at the far end, held its eye on 110 millimeters of worn glass and did not move at all. And I stood next to my grandmother's window with putty under my fingernails, and I was not afraid, and I could not have told you why.